This is the GTN Show, and it's great to be back, although sadly I have lost Mark, but on the plus side I have replaced him with a smaller, slightly prettier version, I think.
Definitely smaller, that's for sure, yeah.
Well, Mark's been away, he's been racing at the Attilo swim run comp, so he's going to be back next week. But Emma, thanks for joining us for this week.
Thanks for having me. And this week there's a huge amount of racing to catch up on, including some mishaps and moments of doubt.
There are, and we've also got the weekly poll, we've got the Caption competition, and I'm going to be taking advantage of Emma and discussing how we can actually incorporate racing in different sports as well as triathlon. So whilst I've got you here, Emma, I want to discuss how interchangeable sports are, especially cycling and triathlon. And I know you do running races as well, but you've got very incredible credentials across all of them. I mean, you're a silver medalist in cycling time trial. You've been 4 times long distance duathlon world champion, and you've won Alpe d'Huez triathlon. So a pretty strong mix there.
Yeah, thank you. But I think that it's fair to say that any results I got in triathlon were definitely skewed towards the races that were bike heavy because I had to make up for my weak swim. But you know, I'm not the only person who's tried to cross over, so it'd be really cool to discuss that. And on that topic, actually, one of GCN's other presenters, Catherine Moore, actually bumped into Jordan Rapp last week at Dirty Kansas, which is an endurance gravel event.
Yeah, well, he was a very successful triathlete, was ITU long distance triathlon world champion 2011, numerous Ironman podiums, and then he's moved back into, well, cycling was his strong event, he's moved back towards cycling and obviously did this race, which Catherine was competing in as well.
Well, yes, Catherine managed to catch up with Jordan at the race. I'm not sure whether we're meaning figuratively or literally in the race, she caught him up, but anyway, here's what he had to say.
I retired from triathlon in September-ish of last year, did my last race, and then was sort of looking for something to do. Did a bit of long distance running. I thought maybe like ultra running would be my thing, but then I just really missed riding the bike, and then got on gravel bike and was like, yeah, this is for me.
In terms of the gravel training, have you had to do anything specific for that in terms of like technical skills?
When it's sort of put your head down in a straight line and go, I have a lot of experience doing that. I got aero bars on the bike and I am comfortable. Like I think I actually have probably here, I would say my aero position on the bike is not like an afterthought. Like I think I have a good solid position. Tougher conditions I think definitely suit somebody like me where I don't have the technical skills, but I have good skills at sort of just suffering in unpleasant conditions.
Well, he went on to finish 6th overall in a time of 11 hours, 25 minutes, just 41 minutes behind the winner, who was actually a pro cyclist.
That's pretty impressive, I think. Catherine also smashed it. She came in 19 hours, 42 minutes, which is really impressive. I actually cannot imagine sitting on a bike saddle for that long, and especially on that kind of terrain. They had epic weather, and it's pretty much all pretty gnarly gravel, so big hats off to Catherine.
But anyway, back to you, Emma. I want to know how you managed to sort of compete at a very high level in the different sports. I know cycling and running are part of triathlon, but they are different events, and how you worked that out with your training and racing.
Well, when I was cycling full time, I didn't do triathlon or running. I was a runner before I was a cyclist, so I always loved running, but I realised fairly rapidly in cycling that if I ran during the bike season, didn't help my cycling. So I deliberately stopped running during the cycling season, which made me sad, made me miss running, but did make me fast from the bike because I think you remove a whole level of fatigue that you get from running, which isn't helpful for cycling. And then for a few years I tried to do both with limited success because I think that the general fitness is complementary but not the specific training, and now that level of competition is gone, I can enjoy my running again. So.
And do you find that running detriments cycling more than cycling detriments running, or the other way around?
Yes, well obviously fatigue is always detrimental, so if you're absolutely knackered from a big hard bike ride, like in an Ironman for example, then it's a lot harder to run that marathon at the end of an Ironman than it is to run a straight marathon, I think most people would find. But I do, definitely find that I found that years and years of endurance cycling really helped my running. So when I was a runner before I took up cycling, I was at best mediocre, I think. I was all right if it was hilly and muddy, and I loved it. I was definitely an enthusiastic runner, but I was not very good because I always got injured whenever I did enough training to sort of start getting to the level where I wanted to be. Whereas with cycling, the only injuries I got were falling off my bike and breaking things. So I didn't get so many overuse injuries. So my endurance base was way better after years of cycling. So I found that I was a much better runner after cycling. And I still use cycling to do quite a lot of my endurance training, because if I run 100 miles a week, I will be broken after a couple of weeks. And now that I'm trying to do longer races, running races, you need that endurance. But I often try and use cycling to help me, both because I love cycling and I've got lots of friends who cycle, but also because if you do maybe a shorter run at the end of a long ride, you're running when fatigued, which is what you're trying to train sometimes.
Without wearing out.
I'm not saying that's a scientific analysis, I'm just saying that's what I do.
But interestingly, actually, Gwen Jorgensen, who was a triathlete and Olympic gold medalist, and now going to running, and she's still using cycling to help her running training. So that's quite a good point. And if you did do, say, a cycling race and a triathlon race and a running race in a season, what order would you put them in, and what gaps would you want for that to get the best out of each one?
In 2014, I did Ironman, the half Ironman in Rapperswil in Switzerland, which has just happened actually last weekend. And I had, by my standards, a pretty good race. I was second, and Daniela Reef beat me, and I think, it's fair enough to get beaten by her. In fact, it was quite an honour to be in the same race, really. So, and then I went straight to a stage race in Spain with my professional cycling team, who they were happy for me to do a little bit of triathlon, but I sucked in the bike race.
Really?
It was horrific. And this is a bike race that a few years before I'd been in the lead. I hadn't won it, but I'd been in the lead for a few years. So to be grovelling in the group and not be able to really do much was horrible, frankly, and when you're on the way up, when you're suffering, it's kind of okay, but when you go to a race expecting to be a bit better than that, it was horrible. And I just thought, this is a disaster. I shouldn't be cycling anymore. I've obviously lost it. But it just took basically a couple of months for my legs to forget the running and to get back into the cycling rhythm. And then by August, I was, so that was in June, and by August I was okay, and I went to the Commonwealth Games and got 2 silver medals, so it was all right.
I was okay.
Yeah, but it was amazing. I basically lost faith in cycling and I'd given up. But I think it just took a couple of months to convert the fitness over.
And if you were sort of now going back and planning a season again and said you wanted to do 3A races, a cycle race, a running race and a triathlon race, what order would you choose to put them in, do you think?
Well, I still don't know. I'll be honest, I'm not a coach.
But just from your personal experience.
I would, in the order terms, I would do cycling, triathlon, running. Because I found that I could always run all right at the end of the season. So if I left it a few weeks and I did a few runs, the fitness transferred across. But the other way around, a bike race is not actually about your baseline fitness. It's about how fast you can go for 10 seconds to attack, or 20 seconds, or 2 minutes, or 3 minutes. And that running just ruins it for me. Okay. So I'll be honest, now that I run a bit more, I feel terrible on a bike. Don't tell GCN.
Doesn't look it though.
No, don't tell GCN, but I am terrible at cycling now.
Okay, it's time for this week's GTN poll.
Yes, and we would like to know, do you race in other sports? Yes or no?
Well, we know it's a huge option and we couldn't give you all of the various options because some of you might do cycling and running races and triathlon. So we're going to open up a discussion in the comments section below this video. So make sure you let us know and we'll go into it further next week.
Yeah, any darts players, make your views known.
Well, it's time to have a look at the results from last week. And we asked you, is one-by the future of triathlon? And a whopping 71% of you said yes and only 29% of people said no. And Emma, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I guess it depends very much on the course you're targeting in triathlon, because the kind of races I like would not take a one by.
I imagine, you like your hilly courses. So.
I do like my hilly courses, and I don't like flat courses, I think is more to the point, because I'm terrible on the flat. But so the kind of course I do, I think it'd be a disaster to have a one by. But for the flatter courses, and I know that a lot of people who are chasing a good time in a half or a full Ironman or a standard distance triathlon, you'd obviously choose a flatter course, and it totally makes sense because you slightly more aero, slightly lower weight, and you reduce the risk of mechanicals with a one by.
But what about when you were doing pure time trialing? Your courses must have been fairly flat then. Did you ever think about it?
Yeah, so, well, actually, not necessarily flat. So in sort of pro cycling, the courses are not sort of a standard 10 or a 25 mile time trial. It just depends on the course. And the ones that I was better at would tend to be the hilly ones, unsurprisingly. Okay. So I always had 2 chain rings, except in the London Olympics where it was pan flat. So I had a one by. Before, I think it was even called one by. I think it was quite a new thing back then. So just the very smart mechanic at British Cycling just jigged it around. So I only had a big chain ring.
Oh, cool.
And it was a very big chain ring because I had small wheels. So yeah.
What size was it?
650C wheels. It was a 56.
Okay.
Maybe a 57. Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. It looked good. I didn't go fast enough to justify it.
Well, it's time for race news. And I thought, whilst I've still got Emma before she's got to dash, I would take advantage. I'm going to start by looking at Ironman 70.3 Switzerland, which I know you've raced quite successfully a couple of times.
Well, moderately. It's almost my home race because I've lived in Switzerland for a while. So I've done it I think I lined up 3 times. One time it was cancelled because there was a landslide because the weather was really bad. It was pouring with rain. And then 2 times I was second behind Daniela Ryf, which I was pretty chuffed with.
I think anyone would be chuffed with that.
Probably about a quarter of an hour behind her, but anyway, and it's a really it's a great course. I like it. It's, the bike's got a flat section, but also a really hilly section. So you need to think about your gear choice very carefully. Wouldn't want a 1x, I don't think. And the run is beautiful. It goes around the old town of Rapperswil-Jona, and there's always lots of people out cheering. And I've got lots of friends there who come and support. The swim is like most swims. I don't like it much, and it's often extremely cold because the race used to be at the end of May, and I mean one year they shortened the swim because the water was so cold. So it's very weather dependent, but nice race I think.
Well, it's stuck at a standard distance this time, and no surprises, Daniela Ryf won it. Now you said you were about quarter of an hour behind, which makes it sound extra long. That's only 15 minutes behind her. This time, second place was actually 16 minutes behind. So Imogen Simmons was second, and then it was Sky Munch.
Whilst in the men's race, the front 2 were Josh Amberger and Manuel Kung, who both swam very well, both rode very well, and Manuel Kung, in front of a home audience, just lost it on the run. He was only about a minute and a quarter off the winner. Whereas in third place is Boris Stein, who traditionally for him, I think, had a slightly slower swim and a very strong bike run.
Cool. Well, Emma, thank you very much for that little insight into that race. I know you've got to go and dash, but we are going to be pulling you back later to have a look at our pain caves.
Thanks, I'm sorry. I have a very interesting video about crank length to ride. Sorry.
Well, I look forward to watching it.
Fascinating.
Thank you. Okay, let's crack on with the rest of the race news. And last week, there were 2 ITU events in the UK. Starting off, it was the Nottingham World Triathlon Mixed Relay Series on Thursday. Now, this was actually the first qualifier event for the Olympic Games. So Mixed Relay is going to be in Tokyo 2020. And this was a chance for teams to actually get valuable qualifying points, which meant there were some very strong teams indeed. Well, it was France who actually had a very strong first half of the race. They had a 30-second advantage at the halfway point, but Katie Zaferes had an incredibly strong swim and ate up that 30-second advantage in just the 300-metre swim, putting the USA back in front. She broke away on the bike and gave Matt McElroy a decent lead, and he managed to maintain that. So USA took the win, and then it looked like it was going to be a battle on the final leg between Johnny Brownlee and Brian Bailey, between GB and Australia. But Johnny Brownlee managed to pull away on the run to take silver for GB. And then it was an incredibly strong finish by France for them to win the bronze, just beating Australia in a sprint finish. And then just 3 days later, it was the World Triathlon Series in Leeds. And sadly, there were a few significant withdrawals before the race. Flora Duffy and Alistair Brownlee were out a week before due to injury. And then last minute, it was Non Stanford who had to pull out. She'd won the silver in the team mixed relay just a few days earlier, but wasn't able to compete. And during the race, it was actually a DNF for Johnny Brownlee due to stomach issues on the run. Well, this certainly didn't deter fellow Brit Vicky Holland. She didn't have the strongest start to her race and admitted to struggling a little bit on the second lap of the swim, and then had a slight nightmare in T1 as she was struggling to get her pedals in front of that home crowd, but she soon caught up with the pack on the bike and they rode together, and it turned into a 10k running race. And Vicky Holland, an incredibly strong runner, she went away to take the win comfortably, 17 seconds ahead of teammate Georgia Taylor-Brown, who it was her first podium at a World Triathlon Series race. And then in third, it was USA's Katie Zaferes, who has remained consistent so far this year, and that's actually put her to the top of the WTS standings. Well, in the men's race, it was Richard Varga who led out the swim. He had a 15-second advantage on chasers, including Johnny Brownlee and Henry Schumann. Well, they soon formed a group of 13 on the bike, but there was a chase pack closing who ended up joining them, and they became a group of over 30 riders, and it turned into an eventual running race. Well, this suited Richard Murray. He saw his opportunity and he made the break. Mario Mola not able to close it, so Richard Murray went on to take the win, having in the swim thought about retiring because he was so disappointed with his performance there. Just shows how you can turn it around. And second place went to Mario Mola, and then in third it was Vincent Louis. And now we have the Ironman Asia Pacific Championships in Cairns. And this was a huge field as well as some very big names. There was a return to action over this distance for 3 times world champion Mirinda Carfrey, as well as Javier Gomez making his debut at this distance. So all eyes were on this race, but on the men's side, it was a very impressive performance by Gomez, but maybe not quite the result that some people expected. Well, it was no surprise to see that Gomez was with the front swimmers, including Tim O'Donnell and Braden Currie. But then on the bike, it was Terenzo Bozzoni who put in a very strong performance to come into T2 with a very small lead. But there were 7 athletes within just 50 seconds of him going out onto the run. And soon it was Currie and Gomez who caught up with Bozzoni. And then Currie and Gomez made a breakaway and ran together side by side for much of the race, both pushing each other constantly until Currie eventually made a surge and he managed to break away from Gomez and went on to take the win by 1 minute 40 ahead of the 70.3 world champion. So Gomez finished in second, and then third, Terenzo Bozzoni managed to hang on for that podium slot, and it was Tim O'Donnell who finished fourth. Well, on the women's side, all eyes were on 3 times Ironman world champion Mirinda Carfrae, who was making her return to this distance after giving birth. Now, previously, Mirinda Carfrae has been known for having a weak swim, and it seems like that hasn't changed too much because she came out of the water 12 minutes behind the swim leader, Lauren Brandon, and 10 minutes behind Teresa Adam. Now, both Adam and Carfrae had strong bikes, which meant that Adam went into the run with a 10-minute lead over Carfrae. Carfrae managed to reduce that to just 6 minutes, but she couldn't do any more than that, so it was Teresa Adam who took the overall win. Mirinda Carfrae finished second, and then in third place after a 2-year absence, it was Beth McKenzie who ran a blistering 2:55 marathon to finish third. Well, now it's time for some Attilio racing. The swim run event went to the Scilly Isles on the weekend, and as I've mentioned, Mark was actually out there racing, and I've managed to speak to him, and he said it was one of the toughest courses yet. Partly because the swim sections are so long. There were 2 sections that were up to 2.5k in length, which apparently is as long, if not longer, than the sections you get at the World Championships, even if the overall race is a that bit shorter. But on top of this, there was sea kelp that the swimmers had to negotiate. And Mark said at one point he had his paddles tangled up, and sounds to me like my absolute worst nightmare. And so much so that a couple of people even had to be rescued out of it. And then the run is also pretty hilly, so it sounds incredibly tough. But that did not deter the Brits. So Mark was in a team with Richard Stannard. They were labelled the Brits, and this was their warm-up for the World Championships, which were in September. And it looked to be going pretty well for those guys. They had the lead up until the halfway point and had been looking fairly comfortable. But having spoken to Mark, he said that fatigue just hit them both, and sadly, they did drop back and ended up finishing 6th overall. But it was Team Garmin, who are getting pretty familiar on the top, that took the win again. Well, sticking with consistency in the women's race, it was another win for Team Envol. And again, for the mixed event, it was Tule Crew who were back on top. And now for our final race from this packed weekend of events. It was Xterra Belgium. And actually, we saw a new face on top of the podium for this season's European Tour with Morgane Rieu in the women's race. She had a slower start. She was over 2 minutes behind the leaders after the swim. But then, thanks to a strong bike, she came into T2 just ahead of Nicole Waters, but then ran away with the win. It was Nicole Waters who managed to stay in second place. And a slightly tired-looking Karina Valls, after a very busy early start to the season, finished third. It's time for the Caption competition. And last week it was a little different because we used a Caption video. And it was a clip from the podium of the Challenge Championship in San Marin. And if you watched last week's show, you would have seen quite a cheeky comment from Sam, who was standing in for me. And he actually suggested that Keenly might have been bottling it on the podium. Well, we did have some other great suggestions. I've narrowed it down to 3. And the first one here is from Dan Ronk. It says, was it now Challenge Championship or Champagne Challenge? Getting confused. Next up, from Martin Vrays, Caption. Now, this one's actually quite a struggle for me to say, so bear with me. Now, this champagne ship race in San Marin is indeed quite a challenge. It's quite a challenge for me to say as well. I really like that one. But our favourite is from Chris Harrison. So, Chris, you win the GTN cap for this caption. Keenly struggling to put champ in champagne. Well, that's quite a cheeky one. But make sure you send in your details so you can get your GTN swim cap. Well, this week we have this picture of Chris Liverman holding a large likeness of his head at the finish line after winning the Ironman Boulder. Now, I reckon winning is going to his head. But I'm sure you can do much better than that, so make sure you send in your caption suggestions in the comments section below. Okay, it's now time for GTN Pain Cave, and I'm delighted to say that Emma has come back in. She's intrigued to know what happens in our triathlon pain caves.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Well, Emma, this first one we have is from Noel Hayden. It says, first ever tweet, our bike turbo set up in the living room, workout room at home. And they're very proud of their first and second place, Ironman 70.3 trophies, and some leg compression gets us off the bike, starting that recovery. What do you think of this setup here?
I'm very impressed by the Normatec, ready straight off the bike. Although I think
wasted.
Personally, I would want to get changed after a turbo session before getting a normal take, because I tend to be a little bit sweaty after a turbo session, no?
Yeah, I guess so. I've never actually used one, but that'd be great to be able to get your recovery going so quickly.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a black, very svelte-looking specialised time trial bike here.
An interesting choice of Zip 808s for the turbo trainer.
Yeah, I know. Ooh.
And BMC Time Machine, looks like, with Roval wheels.
Yeah, very swish-looking setups. I know, Emma, we looked at it a moment ago and you noticed this top tube bag. Interesting position.
Yeah, interestingly positioned on the seat post facing forwards. I can't imagine that not rubbing on your legs, but anyway, everyone's different.
It's an interesting position. But,
might be more aero. That might be the reason.
Yeah, maybe. But who knows? Do let us know, Noel, why you've opted to put that there. But
they're in the UAE, so I can see why you'd train indoors with a fan when it's a bit hot.
God, yeah, it's still going to be cooler, isn't it? They're probably fine getting onto the compression afterwards because it's probably quite cool for them. They're used to that kind of heat. Anyway, our next one is from Adam Waits, and it's a GTN Pain Cave in small London flat bedroom featuring his BMC time machine, his Wahoo kicker, tall fan in the corner, and proudest medals on the shelves.
And some reading, clearly. He's got his bookshelf right there in case he gets bored.
Yeah.
In his turbo session.
I mean, who would get bored on a turbo session?
Nobody.
Well, looks like he's using Zwift setup as well.
That does help with boredom, I found.
Yeah. And some Mavic wheels, I think, on his BMC, but a very tidy, clean looking setup there.
And he's got his Wahoo mat, which is very helpful because he's got a nice parquet floor and you wouldn't want to sweat on that.
Definitely not. No, good setup there. Cool. Our last one we have from Salvatore at the Real Sedana.
This is extraordinary. I mean, he basically has an entire training gym.
Yeah.
I mean, it's better equipped than many gyms, I would say.
You have not seen a lot of our pain caves because we actually get, it's amazing, some incredible pain caves.
Well, this is insane. He's got his own treadmill.
Yep.
And a little kind of weights corner with a step-up block. And obviously his turbo, which is...
Yeah. And he's ready with his puncture repair kit as well, just
to get a punch on the turbo. That's wise.
I'm guessing this bike is used for indoors and outside. And best thing to see, it's Mark and I here. He's not going to get bored. He's not going to get bored on his turbo session, is he?
You can learn a lot in a long turbo session watching GTN.
Brilliant. Well, do keep sending in your pain caves using hashtag GTN Pain Cave. Okay, well, that's it for this week's show. And Emma, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real delight having you.
No, thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure to do it. And if I can come back sometime, just let me know.
You are welcome anytime.
Well, even though I can't swim.
Well, I can't really ride a bike, so we can brush over those bits.
Rubbish.
Anyway, if you haven't done so yet, you want to catch all of our videos, just hit the globe to subscribe. And if you want to see some indoor training tips from none other than Lionel Sanders, that video is just here.
Or you can check out this video on pedaling technique, which is very important.